welcome to another episode of the Evolve CEO podcast. I'm your host, Greg Gillies.
And I'm Tracey Gillies.
And this week we're going to be talking about a really important topic for couples, married couples, or people in intimate relationships, and that is the evolution of the relationship. Now, we're going to be talking from a lot of context around Tracey and I's kind of life, which is married with kids and running businesses and kind of spinning all of those plates. And we're going to be talking about the stages or the periods of relationships and how we come into relationships and kind of how they evolve, and some quite often become very dysfunctional as we go through these different stages and periods of relationships and all the added pressures. So I'm just going to share with you these 4 stages, which are the high level stages. There are a lot of micro stages and periods through a relationship, but the 4 stages that we identify with and talk about with our clients are: the first stage is the honeymoon period. We're going to be talking positives and negatives about what happens in that period. The marriage period, then we're going to be talking about the parenting period, then we're going to be talking about the post-parenting period. Okay, so statistically worldwide, there is a lot of separation, there is a lot of divorce, there is a lot of dysfunction in relationships, there is a lot of disconnection and, I guess, separation, which happens over a period of time. But we want to be talking today about what we can do to evolve our relationship. Tracey and I have been on a real journey. We've had some really, really tough times. But in the last 6-7 years, we doubled down on ourselves and we've really taken our marriage to a whole new level. So this is very much going to be about the evolution and the growth and improvement of your relationship as an individual and then coming together as a couple. So we're going to kick this off with the honeymoon period. So the honeymoon period, as everybody is aware, is the initial stages of when you get into a relationship. There is a lot of intimacy. There is a lot of hormone release. There is this energetic attraction, and it's fast to create this kind of deep love and connection. You want to be around the person. You want to be close to them and touching them. It's quite electric, and it's an exciting part of a relationship, isn't it,
Oh, it's
Trace?
the most exciting part. And I think people's flaws can become like endearing, or we look at them and we're in awe. So we almost look over lots of these details that then may play out later in the relationship. But definitely, that sexual chemistry, all of those things, and just that undivided attention and time together, it's just quite magical. And it's almost like, I don't know, I want to say sometimes it's like we're put under a spell by it.
So this is obviously, as a relationship grows, what we remember and desire and want to go back to. But before we move on to the next period, I just want everybody to understand what is actually truly underneath, what's going on in this honeymoon period, because we are in awe and we're under this spell and it's magical and it's exciting and all of the positives. But we are attracted to a partner or another person at a much, much deeper level, and it's not always positive. It's usually about our lacks, our desires, our insecurities, our trauma, our drama, and we can quite often attract a partner or be drawn to a partner that matches a lot of traits of a parent. So for likes of, I'll give you an example, for the likes of a man who had a mum who was always there for him as a child through teenage, had all that support, all that love, just had that homely mum that was always there. Quite often they're naturally attracted to a woman in those early stages that will give them that sort of reassurance and support and comfort and look after them, right? And then from a woman's perspective,
I think a lot of people think that they would never want to attract anyone like their parents, but the truth is that they do. And maybe, as again I said before, that some of the stuff is almost masked by all the other, upsides or exciting, things to do with the relationship. And it's over time that you almost see, through these things. I know Georgie, our daughter's horrified. She says she'll never marry a man like like Greg. But I go, I'm sure, Greg's got lots of amazing traits and characters, and I can see exactly that. You end up attracting that. It's just what we do. We almost attract these things because these are some of our life lessons or things that we need to harmonize, and this is what we recreate. And, even in relationships, we always talk about healing, don't we, Greg? We keep recreating things as an opportunity to move past or to heal these areas in ourselves.
Well, I hope my older daughter does attract somebody more evolved than what I was when I was a teenager, a young 20s, trust me. So just on that honeymoon period, it's kind of like we come together through intimacy, okay? We bring the best of us and the worst of us into a relationship, but those initial stages, we're just highlighting the best of us, right? We are like literally creating that connection and that love, and it's intimacy, then it's connection, and then it's communication, and then that evolves. And as that evolves and we identify that this is somebody that I actually want to spend my life with, then we move into the marriage period and commitment. And I'm not saying you have to get married, but there is a time when you make a commitment to each other. It might be moving in together, it might be getting engaged, and we call this the marriage period. This is where you're starting to get a lot more comfortable with each other. You're potentially living in the same house or the same environment. You're settling for each other. You are starting to see some of the other person's insecurities and kinks in the armors, but your relationship is still strong because you're excited by the future. You're excited about your goals and your shared interests and your vision and what you want to create for your future. And if you're going to have children and you want to get financially stable and set yourself up and buy a house together and all of those things, that's like another level of excitement, right? So you're going from the honeymoon intimacy and now you're going into more of a planning and a future vision stage, which is another really, really exciting stage of relationship. So as we get into that marriage period, is there anything you wanted to add on to that as we go into
I
that
just
stage
think
of
that
settlement?
shared vision would really hold so much together and, growing together and evolving. And so there's those common interests and usually that communication, we give, again, that undivided attention to each other that we need and that we so want.
And the other thing is usually at those stages before you have children, it's kind of like, it's called the double income, no kids, right? So you've got more finances. You can do more. You can travel more. You can go out more. I know with Tracy and I in those initial stages before kids, we used to party a lot. We used to go out and have so much fun. Yeah, big friends groups, going out, traveling, and all of that sort of stuff. So then we move on to the parenting period. Now, this is we're going to spend a lot of time in this. So yes, we're talking to people who have got children. That's kind of who we are, and that's who our target market also is. This is a massive period of change. This is probably the most challenging period of any married relationship. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this one. So as we go into the parenting period and we have children, a lot of things change. So a woman's body and hormones change so that she can have the children and give them what they need for survival. Now, I'll tell you, we've seen it time and time and time again, that if you've come into a relationship as a man, I'm speaking from the man now, and your partner has given you all the love and attention and everything that you desired in those initial stages, and then the children come along and she has to adjust and hormones change and everything, and then she's giving all the love to the children, whether you're aware of it or not, this is actually a challenging phase for a lot of men, is because we crave and desire the intimacy and the connection, but there is now other people involved, and the mum is like breastfeeding and the sleep deprivation that comes into play. So before I go into the other areas of the parenting period, from a woman's perspective, do you want to share that change of like when you have your first child and what changes in a woman and how it does bring a lot of more love into the relationship, but it is a dynamic that changes within the couple because it's now not just you two?
We had difficult babies. So, our first child, she had colic and she screamed 5 to 6 hours a night. So you put on top of a relationship the strain and the stress, the exhaustion, and it's like my body's no longer my own. So I don't really want to give it up any other time. I'm tired, and that intimacy is really not forefront at all of my mind any longer. And, even you've always been a good man, Greg. You've always helped when, you've always stepped up in that. But I know a lot of relationships where the man gets, looked after by the woman in that sense. And it's almost like, I know, even having more and more children, The woman has so many roles and responsibilities of looking after the baby. They don't really want another child to look after. So maybe that tolerance in the relationship for those things, it can drastically change. And it's like if that support level wasn't in the relationship before, the wife needs so much more at that time. And if that relationship didn't hold that, it just can create a lot of strain and stress because, it's like there's a whole new needs that, the woman needs or that are not being met. So it's just hard. And it's the one time like that we talked before about that, the honeymoon period and then that marriage before children. And you have so much time. You have time for each other. You have time for yourself. And then when, you have children, that just changes. I kind of wonder what the hell did we do with all our time before we had kids. I squandered it. Just, it's so precious. And I just think you don't really get taught how to be a parent. It's this new territory. And at times you feel like you're fumbling and that you don't really know what you're doing. And so it's just such a challenging time on so many levels. Physically, it is taxing, mentally, emotionally. And then, if there is relationship strain to add into the mix, it just gets heightened.
Totally. So that word time, that's probably the biggest variable that disappears when you start becoming parenting, because there's added additional pressures and demands. And again, I'm talking traditionally or typically, or I'm actually just talking about our circumstances and a lot of our clients' circumstances. But this is where the man or myself, I doubled down in my career and I wanted to provide for my family. So it was about initially when I was in corporate, it was climbing the corporate ladder. It was working harder. It was putting more energy into my career so I could make more money so that I could support my family, because I didn't want Tracey to have to go back to work, because we decided that we wanted 3 kids. And we wanted them close together so that we could just enjoy that period and not have it drawn out. So that was kind of our plan. So I was working, and a lot of men are out working and doing what they're meant to be doing. And that can become a trap, right? You can be constantly chasing and creating this success so that you can give your family the lifestyle that you want. And it gets to a point where they want your time, but you don't have time. And then on the flip side, we now live in an era where a lot of people can't even live off one income. So here you've got the mum or the wife who's juggling the kids when they're first born and doing the breastfeeding, and maybe they're on parental leave or they're a stay-at-home mum, and then you get to a period where maybe they get a part-time job or they go back to work, and then you're juggling kids and you're both in careers. So we live in a completely different time than our grandparents and even our parents, where you could live comfortably on one income. So all of a sudden you've got these financial pressures. You've got these goals and dreams that you had before you had children that you don't want to let go of. You want the investments. You still want to travel. You want the nice house. You want the nice cars. You want all of these things. So the pressures and demands, they start growing and growing and growing. And the quality time starts to diminish and diminish and diminish. And this is the compounding effect of where we see so many marriages start to unwind.
I know the demands are kind of different at different stages of parenting. I know in the early years we had like 3 kids under 5, didn't have any family support. And I know there was times you probably didn't even want to come home, Greg, because you didn't know what you were going to walk into. But he went, no, you didn't. You came home. But you literally are walking into a wife that is like in that witching hour, and the kid's unhappy, and she is unhappy, and she is stressed, and she is kind of probably at times a bit grumpy. And so it's hard. It's like walking into all of the stress that possibly wasn't even your own. But if you've got all of that stress at work going on, it just compounds it when you get home. And then, I remember when our kids were young, I think I was about to have my 3rd baby, and I had the 2, and I was talking to a woman, and I had a really bad day and I was just about crying. And she had teenage kids, and I said, tell me that it gets easier. And she said, no, it doesn't. It actually gets harder.
Oh.
It wasn't what I wanted to hear. But she said, relish in the fact when you can put them to their rooms and they will listen. So now our life is different because, yes, I'm not that stay-at-home mum. We both work. But at times I feel like we are that ship's passing in the night. We're kind of just talking at each other because there's just like juggling work, then we're juggling kids, we're juggling sports, we're juggling most nights with activities on. And so it is such, creating that space is like you have to create the space to actually have that time together to really maintain the relationship, because the day-to-day just doesn't cut it, does it?
Yeah, no. So what we see time and time again, and it happened to us, is this lack of quality time and these additional demands and pressures. You have to start sacrificing and giving. So maybe the man who's working and trying to make the money is holding on to these world pictures about this life vision that you agreed to having, and having this amazing life and this lifestyle and travel and all those sort of things. And then maybe the wife or the woman is feeling really bogged down and stressed that she's changing her worldview because all she cares about is just having the love and the connection and the time at home and wanting just that family dynamic. So we can like, men can easily hold on to these, I guess, worldviews about what was agreed in the honeymoon and the marriage period about what you're going to create. And he's just 100 miles an hour building that, like nothing's changing his mind. And then the wife can be evolving and changing her perspective or her priorities or what life looks like for her. And you can start to separate and not even see it happening. You can start, it brings in arguments about feeling like you're not on the same page. Everybody's tired and exhausted and get easily triggered. And we see this time and time again, that the shared life vision between a couple changes and the shared interests get ignored because the quality time is not there anymore. And if you start losing your shared life vision, or if you don't make time to adjust your shared life vision based on your new life and try and add in that quality time, that even if it's date night and those shared interests, this is when relationships start to pull apart. You start to be ships in the night that are only catching up every now and then. And initially, you don't think much of it, but over the years and years and years, you start to disconnect. You start to separate. You start to become completely different individuals. The intimacy and the communication and the connection starts to get really, really strained. And it gets to a point where a lot of couples, they don't know how to bring it back together. They get to a point where quite often they resent each other.
And I think people don't even see the stages of a relationship, and
No.
they just expect that relationships like those ones should be the easiest. In fact, some of those close ones are the hardest ones and require the most work. I know we all have this gauge and this view sometimes about what movies make love look like, and it's not that at all. And I think we have these expectations that just fall short. But it's like we have to reinvent ourselves at different stages of our relationship and see what the needs are in the relationship and what's not being met. Like, I know Greg and I now, our kids are old enough now. I think we just had our first staycation for one night. Like maybe 3 months ago, and it was the first time to be able to go away together. And so we have more time now with each other because our kids possibly don't have as much need on us at certain times. And it means that, we can go out to dinner together. But there was those early days where we didn't have any of that. I remember there was times where we forgot our anniversary. I think Greg's mum texted later that night and I actually cried because I was had such a rubbish day, and I said I would have at least ordered takeaways and not cooked dinner if I had realised. So, it's just, I think, realising what stage you're at, and that, it does change, and then we have to change and evolve. But I think the truth of relationships is, I think we stop meeting our own needs, and then we look at the other person and wonder why they're not meeting the needs for us. But we can't get anyone to meet those. We have to be meeting them for ourselves.
This is really, really important. This is around the relationship dynamics. This is around love languages. This is around individual needs. When we're exhausted, we're under pressure, and we're stretched from pillar to post, and both couples, doesn't matter what your role is in the relationship, when there's kids involved, and then and you're trying to build the business or the career and the finances and the mortgage and interest rates are going up, all of those sort of dynamics add pressure. And we get to a point where we're so exhausted, we don't feel like we can do much more. So we look to our partner to fill our bucket. And this is another dangerous trap, is when you're constantly looking to your partner to help fill your love bucket, to prop you up, and you're not getting what you need. So you start getting resentful, and then we stop taking full responsibility for our internal selves, like our mental, physical, and spiritual health, is because we just get stuck in these ruts and this definition of what the man's role is and what the woman's role is, and it becomes quite dysfunctional and disconnected. So there is a lot of deeper underlying, this is the stage where you're exhausted, where you're stretched, when you're under pressure, and the compounding effect. This is when the deep insecurities, the deep inner child, the deep inner beliefs and limitations, they start to rear their ugly head. And this is why we spoke about in the honeymoon period, you don't see all of that. It's too heightened. It's too much emotion. There's too much just love and connection and being the best version of yourself. But when you're in this marriage period and you've got all of the pressures and demands and everything on you, the worst of you shows up because you're just depleted. You're exhausted. The wife could literally be physically out of balance after having children. I know Tracey, she had postnatal depression. What that did to her mentally and physically, I couldn't expect this incredible, vibrant wife to be there for me all the time. She was depleted. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still wanted the intimacy. I still wanted to have an amazing sex life. And here's Tracey with 3 kids under the age of 5, literally depleted. And often, I'll be honest, I was selfish. I was like, what about me? I'm out there working hard. Then we'll get into stupid arguments about who's working harder. Yeah. And that didn't help each other. That's just a poor me. This leads me into another communication dysfunction that happens when a relationship is under constant pressure, and that's called the drama triangle. And what happens in the drama triangle is we're actually against each other. And a lot of these Hollywood movies that Tracey was talking about with the hero and the damsel in distress, it's all designed around this hero and this victim mentality, right? But there's 3 parts to this drama triangle. So somebody can feel like a victim, which makes them feel hopeless, which makes them feel powerless. They're just defeated and depleted because they just can't do everything that they want to do. And then another person can be a rescuer, where they just want to solve all of their problems and just give advice and get on with it. And then the third one is the persecutor, and the persecutor is literally the person who just gets frustrated and gets triggered and says things that they shouldn't say or they don't mean. This is the breakdown of communication. This is where every fight tends to fall into the same loop, where there is no resolve, there is no coming together, there is no amicable, calm conversation, and it just adds additional pressure on top of it. And then we feel guilty because we don't want to yell and scream and argue in front of our kids because we don't want our kids to grow up with all that sort of stuff. So the added pressure of us not being the best version of ourselves adds this compounding effect to this parenting period where we start to pull away from each other, because all it's doing is triggering fight or flight. And for a lot of couples, if they do a lot of fighting and they want to get to a point where they're not fighting and they don't know how to resolve or evolve their relationship, then they go into flight and they start avoiding each other. And avoiding each other is even worse because you're literally just pulling away to a point where you feel like you're more flatmates than a married couple in love. And this leads me to the next point, which is the tail end of the parenting period and moving into the post-parenting period. as this compounding effect for so many relationships starts to break the relationship down, it starts to break the communication, the intimacy starts to disappear. A lot of married couples, they don't even have sex anymore. And if they do, it's very, very, very seldom. Yeah. So the intimacy goes, the connection goes, the communication goes, and you pull away. So many people stay in a relationship and say they're doing it for the kids. And all they're doing is staying in an unhealthy relationship where they're not communicating, they're arguing, they're disconnected, there's no shared interests, they've literally got no shared vision, and they think they're doing it for the kids, but all they're doing is teaching the kids what a dysfunctional relationship looks like, and the kids are going to go on and either try and be the exact opposite, or they're going to repeat it because our children become us. And this is like how the generational cycle repeats itself again.
We see it time and time again that people have lost themselves. It's like they don't even know how to get back to themselves, and their relationships suffer. But it's really about themselves, because all relationships are really just an extension of the one that we have with ourselves. And those closest relationships, oh my goodness me, they are the hardest. Like I often say that Greg wears all the faces for me. And explaining that, it's like, I just think the world's got too much separation now. I think we live in these big houses and we're all quite separate, and we're all going about these day-to-day lives and trying to make out that it's not hard, but it actually is bloody hard at times. And so all of my, I don't know, what do you call them? Deep insecurities, fears, holes, flaws, all of these things. Greg will just highlight them for me. And I get very mad because I would like to say it is him. But, I remember once we did a podcast together, and they asked us at the end, they were going to do this big question, and we just had to answer it at the same time. And they said, what's the best thing you could do in a relationship? And we both said at the same time was to work on yourself. Like, our relationship has gone through so much. I will be honest and say it wasn't the greatest in the earlier years. I think it was built on a lot of insecurity. I got together when, I was 16. I think I was just a people pleaser. Someone liked me, wow, especially male attention, that sort of thing, because I was so kind of low in my own identity. And most of my life, I just kind of tagged my wagon onto Greg's, yeah? And then it's easy to blame him for everything that goes wrong, because I didn't really pick it for myself. And then as we've gone through this journey, it's really beautiful that we've grown and changed together. I think that's quite rare. And I think that is the key to a relationship succeeding and growing and expanding, is when people move forward and grow together. And it's not easy. It takes work. They can be the people you love the most, and then at the times they're the people you just want to, they can make you really angry, but it's not even really about him. It's about, looking at what that trigger was in me, or why did I kind of blow up in that situation? Or maybe our life at the moment is too overcomplicated. We've got too many demands, and we need to address this stage in our life and reduce this and see it for what it is, so we can actually free up space and time for ourselves. Because when we make that time and space, we actually have this beautiful connection and relationship. But it has to be nurtured. I think people think they can just, same as mental health, that they don't have to put in that much effort. I was just going to say, I remember I went to my daughter's high school, and there was a psychologist talking, and she was an amazing psychologist for young people. And she actually gave statistics and also said that sometimes those relationships that are the closest to us, we don't even invest the dedicated time. We'll kind of speak to someone nicer at the bloody supermarket. Yeah. And so I find myself with Greg, I find myself that we're busy and we'll be trying to fit in these conversations. He's talking at me, I'm talking at him. I'm already in a heightened state, and it just triggers me because I'm in this fight or flight, or I'm in a bit of a stress mode. So I can't hear anything he says. I can just hear the insecurities or what it brings up in me. Whereas if we really carve out time to talk together, I could hear what he has to say or his concerns, and not really lump it on top of my stress, because I'm in this place that I can hold that space or hear these conversations. And I think as you've kind of gone through those stages, Greg, communication, at the start, we give this undivided attention. If we showed up for a friend, we would sit there and give undivided attention. Do we do that for our partner? It becomes easy to overlook some of these basic things that make relationships work. And then we wonder why our relationship isn't working.
So We have a very strong belief, and this is the work that we do. And if you've followed us or checked us out before, if you want to evolve a relationship, you have to work on yourself first, because we are energetic beings. And if you do the deep inner work on yourself and you're not looking to the other person to fill you up, you go and do your own inner healing. Everybody has to heal. This is just a byproduct of being a human being and the human condition and just the way we are brought up and grow and what society has done to us. So everybody needs to heal. And the best way to evolve a really close and important relationship like a marriage is to work on yourself, to heal yourself, to align all the areas of your life and to show up as the best version of yourself, even if the other person is struggling and suffering and triggering. Because as you evolve and as you raise your energetic vibration and as you start to step into the best version of yourself, people have to rise up to meet you or they fall away. And if you're meant to be in this relationship and you are soul partners like Tracey and I are, even though we have almost divorced a number of times because it just got so horrific, but we were meant to be together and we were meant to do great things. We have completely transformed ourselves and our marriage and our relationship and our lifestyle and everything over the last 6 or 7 years because we did exactly what we're saying to you right now. You work on yourself as an individual. You expand as an individual, and we see it over and over and over again when we work with a client who's just one person in a relationship. It gives the other person in the relationship permission to focus on themselves and to elevate and expand themselves because their partner's taking care of their own shit.
And they're not telling the other person to do it, because quite often when people want someone to change, they will say, and they'll be very vocal about it and do it in almost like a pushing way. But this way, they are just simply elevating and expanding themselves and healing and changing. And by default, things change around them as well.
So if you're going through a tough time in your marriage, if you're in that kind of later parenting stage and it's post-parenting and you literally have no interest and you want to save your marriage, but you think regularly, we're going to separate, we're going to get a divorce. As soon as the kids are out of the nest, it's going to be all over. We encourage you, the post-parenting period is kind of the period that you've been so looking for. And it is the period that can be the most exciting part of your whole life, is because you've got the resources, you've got the finances, you've got the lifestyle, and you need to work on yourself so that you can have this stage of your life. So it's about doing the individual deep inner work so you can elevate yourself to elevate the relationship, because the key is two individuals actually need to heal their deepest insecurities, all of the underlying issues, to elevate yourself so that when you come back together in a relationship, it's actually higher and beyond any other period or stage that you've ever been in since you've known each other. A lot of men in particular will just be like, oh man, if it was just back to the honeymoon period where she just loved me and wanted me and I had sex on tap and all that sort of stuff. And this is like the worldview. It's like, if only I could get back to that. And then they believe there's no way I can get back to that 20 years, 30 years later. There's another level. There is another level. It's way beyond all of those stages. But it's about the individuals doing the individual work and not looking to the partner to have to do the work or to move at the same pace as them. Somebody's got to take the lead. Somebody's just got to step into themselves, because every single relationship that you have in life, whether it's your marriage, your children, colleagues, family, friends, that relationship can only be as good as the relationship you have with yourself. So you have to do the inner work on yourself to evolve the relationship with yourself, and then you'll show up as a better version who doesn't get triggered, who doesn't blame, who doesn't get angry, who doesn't get irritable, who's nice to be around. Yeah?
Mm. You were going to share what?
What was I going to share?
You were going to share that shared life interest with people.
Yes. We've got 2 resources that we want to share with you for listening to this podcast. We've created them and shared with them in our mastermind clients. And one of them is a shared life vision, and the other one is a shared interest. Now, these are processes that you do as an individual and you get your partner to do at the exact same time, and you fill them out, and then you come together and you talk about it with your partner and cross-reference. It's not an opportunity to cause a fight or to point fingers or to get upset that you're misaligned. It's an opportunity to actually have a conversation and listen and understand the other person, who they are at the deepest level. And you will get so much clarity around the areas that you want to come more in aligned with. Yeah. So I'm going to be adding links to the show notes of this podcast to the shared life vision and the shared interest document. Again, do them as an individual, then come together as a couple and share what you wrote down with each other. It'll be an amazing conversation starter and a way that you can start to come more aligned about the next stage of your life. So, evolution. We are always evolving. We need to be intentional. The closest relationships are the hardest relationships, so they take the most work, but we take them for granted, and we've got to stop taking them for granted. And the closest relationship is the one that we have with ourselves. Then the next closest relationship for me personally is with Tracey. Then my children, because my children need to see that Tracey and I are in love, are supportive, are on the same page, have a shared life vision, have shared interests, have fun together, play together, even though we work together. Yeah? That's the key. That's the key to evolving your relationships and your marriage. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Evolve CEO podcast. If you value the information that is in our podcast, please like, subscribe, and add a review to our podcast page, because it'll help us understand the value that you are receiving, and more importantly, spread the world of this podcast. Also, share it with your friends and your family. Now, every listener of our podcast gets a free gift from us, and this is our 9 Pillars of Success, Love and Happiness life assessment. This is the exact same life assessment that our high-level clients, which are CEOs and business leaders, go through on an annual basis so that they can assess and reflect the past 12 months of their life and then plan their desired outcome for the next 12 months of their life. And this is our gift to you for listening in. So please follow the links below and you'll find the link to the assessment page. You'll also find Tracey and my social media links. We would love for you to connect with us on our social media channels, follow our additional content on there, as we want to provide as much value as we can in the event of helping you create more success, love and happiness in your life. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode.